Alan, I have a question.
Yes, Dean. Hi.
Hello. So, good morning. So,
Morning.
what are the biggest shifts you're seeing in sort of marketing strategies these days as we're moving into 2025, right? Compared to, say, 2 years ago, we're in a very different world than just 2023, right? A lot of it because of AI and then the economy and all that kind of stuff. But, like, what are the sort of biggest shifts you're seeing? And also let folks know who you are.
So, good morning. I'm Alan Gonsenhauser from Demand Revenue. I mentor, advise, and coach
Mhm.
chief marketing officers and VPs of marketing, help them with projects, and I'll sometimes come on as an interim or fractional CMO. And most of my work is with private equity portfolio companies in the SaaS software, health tech, healthcare, or professional services spaces. In terms of what companies, what
Yeah.
strategies are
What are the big
changing,
shifts that are happening in the
big
marketing?
shifts. Well, I think CMOs and marketing organizations need to think about their budgets in this environment with economic uncertainty, in terms of what they're going to try to cut and what they're going to invest more in. And I
Right.
think they have to change the mix. So the types of things you can cut, you can do a content audit and discover that 70% of the content you have isn't being used, and you can cut out, and that can save you time. You can consolidate agencies,
Right.
and there are also some bloated martech stacks, and you want to have the right martech stacks that actually are bringing you results. So I think those are areas that I've seen some organizations cut. The areas to invest in are things like customer-led growth, um, driving a remarkable customer experience from when someone's a prospect to when they become a customer, when you onboard them and, maintain them and drive net revenue retention. Um, Intent information in addition to MQLs to understand when people are in market. So there may be good prospects, just not now. So you need to nurture folks and understand when people are in market and understand when people are crowding your website, because most of the visitors of your website are going to be anonymous. So you want to know who they are and you can connect with them.
Right.
Driving better alignment cross-functionally between marketing, sales, customer success, product, and finance. And finally, generative AI. More and more investment in generative AI. It's here to stay, and it's not a threat. It's a tool to leverage to make us more productive. And organizations are figuring out how to do that these days.
All right.
So
And
if that makes sense.
that was an excellent answer. Thank you very much. And Doug, before I want to ask you the same question, but before I do, it's a jargon-free podcast, and so most of the audience are not marketing people, and so MQL is a marketing qualified lead. So a lead
Yes.
that marketing has qualified and said, this is someone we probably want to pull closer to us.
It's when you request someone's email to
Yeah.
get content on your website. And the one thing I'll add is you have to be very careful not to gate stuff, because if you gate stuff, most people won't see it. But MQL is one way of getting leads, but you need to understand intent data, who's coming to your website, in addition to marketing qualified leads.
And Doug, hi, welcome back. By the way, welcome back to both of you. You both been on the podcast before. This is episode 107. And so it's great to see everybody again. I know we're getting up there. And so, Doug, tell folks a little bit about you and what, if any, shifts are you seeing in marketing strategies this year and you think for next year?
Yeah, sure thing, Ding. And congrats on 107, almost at the magic 007 there. So I lead Peak Point Solutions. We're a management and strategy consultancy, specializing in advisory, fractional, and interim roles. Our sweet spot is B2B tech marketing companies, B2B tech companies. In terms of what's happening in the market, first of all, thank you, Alan, for taking my list. But let me let me put a wrapper around it that says, people should think, which is, you need to be deliberate at this point. I think often people have this checklist of, here's the 15 things I need to do to have an effective marketing program. And they just do all those, whether it's events or digital or, PR or content. And to what Alan was saying, going back and being very deliberate and looking at what's performing and what's not performing. Because there are two sides to the question. What do you cut and what do you add? And I think, the simplistic structure is it varies from company to company based on who your audience is. I've been in places where we built this massive digital program. We look at the pipeline and the results are zero. And I pivoted the whole thing towards live events. And we got tremendously more results. It was counterintuitive. But again, it was data driven. And so be thoughtful, look at the metrics, and the metrics might be quantitative or qualitative. We have this focus on dashboards, but sometimes the gut is actually true. And then AI, I think there's some nuance around AI that also falls under the umbrella of think about it. Mm-hmm. I think often AI is treated as a solution in search of a problem, and it gets inserted in places where it doesn't necessarily belong or it's not suited yet. It's not mature enough. It is revolutionary. It is changing marketing, and it will do great things, and is doing some great things for some people now, but being very conscious about where it's being used. For example, using it for editing instead of for writing, or if you're using it for writing, making sure that you're loading up that the database and the AI with, all of your corporate materials so it makes sense and you're on brand with what comes out. Right. So use AI, absolutely. You should be investing in training your people on AI, on the Claudes and the GPTs, but just make sure you're being deliberate about it and that you're using it to solve your biggest problems. Not as, again, it's the phrase is when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Not every problem requires a hammer. Not every problem requires an AI yet.
Right. So Doug, I don't normally talk about anything topical in the podcast, but for the first time ever, the Department of Labor just came out and revised down the number of jobs that they previously had said in prior months and quarters had been created by the largest correction they've made in 20 years. There are actually almost 1 million fewer jobs created in the last year than the government thought, right? And so and that leads us into this question, which is given the current economic landscape, right? How is that influencing companies? You're talking to a lot of companies these days who are looking for marketing help, right? How has the economic landscape sort of, influenced marketing budgets and priorities right now?
Anytime there's a downturn, the influence of marketing budgets is always downwards. And typically what you find is what happens is the people who grow the most in a downturn are actually the people who continue to invest in the downturn. And it's people's needs don't go away because budgets got tight. And if anything, obviously I'm a bias because I'm a marketing practitioner here. You need to invest in the downturn so you're there for the upswing. You need to have that brand recognition. You need to have that affinity with the potential customer so that when they are, whether it's B2B or B2C, when they are in the market again, you're the first name they call because you're top of mind and you've gone through the funnel with them. And you may not quite be a purchase yet, but they are aware of you. They have a preference for you, and boy, they'd like to use you because you kept investing through the downturn.
And Alan, what do you think? Economic landscape, how's it affecting what clients want to spend money on, or how much money they're willing to spend right now in marketing?
I couldn't agree more with what Doug just said. I think we're simpatico on these questions, back and forth, which is really nice. I will say that, yes, there's been a downturn, but private equity has a lot of dry powder. In other words, a lot of money to invest that they haven't invested. I think they're waiting for a couple of things. Number one, for interest rates to go down. And there's a lot of indication that the Fed's going to decrease rates next month, which will really help in terms of cost of capital and investment. And number two, I think people are waiting for the election to be over. I think there's a lot of uncertainty about, what is life going to be after the election, because it can be very different. So I would think going into December and January, there's going to be more investment. So I think the outlook looks really good once some of these things are behind us. But certainly, looking at your target audience, having a culture of experimentation and failing fast and figuring out, what works better, understanding your target audience's watering holes, where they look for content and, where they look for information. And I agree very much that those companies that can modify that mix, as I was talking about, and doing more things with customer-led growth and AI, and even during a downturn, and cut the areas. It's like being a general manager. CMOs need to be a good general manager. They need to be really good at the jazz, the creative, the breakthrough, and the analytical, the classical, and meld them together. And especially during a downturn, if you just cut, no one ever reduced themselves into greatness. You have to invest when you cut. You have to remix your budget. So, as Doug just mentioned, when you come on the other side of the downturn, you're going to be well positioned with your brand and demand to be top of mind with your target audience.
Well, Alan, like in the market now, and this will go to both of you because you're both in the fractional CMO space, you're both marketing, consultancy kind of strategy kind of space, right? Like, what's the process of, or how is like finding clients changing this year, and you think next year, right? Or is it changing at all?
Well, in my case, most of my clients are CMOs or CEOs of private equity portfolio companies. So they're like 200 million into the billions. And it really, for me, it's like account-based sales or account-based marketing, maybe a little of each, maybe more sales and marketing, but it's all about developing relationships, longer-term relationships. There are a lot more smaller companies with needs out there, which I'm not targeting, but
right.
For me, the needs I see from private equity are episodic. I may not hear in a few months, then all of a sudden there's an issue or a problem that I can help them with in a number of ways, rebranding or, building infrastructure, helping them scale for the future, things like people, process, technology, data analytics, and pricing.
Demand can be lumpy. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, it could be lumpy, but it's I don't think that's going to change. To me, it's all about relationships. I don't even call it selling. I call it relationship management. So maybe that's closer to account-based sales or account-based marketing. I also market, I do social media and that kind of stuff, but really most of my business comes from my network and referrals.
And Doug, how about you? How's the process of finding clients changing over time?
Dean, going back to something that you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast with the downwardly revised unemployment numbers, I'm seeing more competition out there. There's a lot of people who have been doing fractional CMO work on a long-term basis, essentially as a career.
Right.
But there's been a lot of people in the last year and a half, which have come in and hung out their shingle as a fractional CMO. There's a lot of talented people who have been laid off and caught up in the downturn, and they're looking for work too.
Whether they've ever been a CMO or not, in many cases.
Yes. No, it's fascinating to me to look at someone and go, you're calling yourself a fractional CMO, and the highest you've ever been is a manager, senior manager running social media. And it's like, there's a bit more to it than that, folks.
I think the name has come into vogue, and so everybody wants to position themselves.
The title is very popular,
Yes, absolutely.
That's why I mentioned I've been a CMO 10 times, 7 full-time companies, 3 interim since I started Demand Revenue over 3 years ago. And I've mentored, advised, coached over 130, I think now 140 CMOs and VPs of marketing, because I think with so many people trying to position themselves as fractional, maybe the interim word is better. I don't know. But, what I do is really a combination of advisory, interim, fractional, and projects. But I think it's more, to your point, Doug, it's more important than ever to differentiate yourself in this environment where that term has become so crowded.
I just did a quick look here, and I keep track of this. I go to LinkedIn, and, just worldwide, I just let it tell me on all of LinkedIn, how many fractional CMOs are there? Fractional CMO as a phrase, right? A phrase and a title. And this time last year, there were like 3,400. And right now, looking at it, there's a little over 7,500. So it's double in a year.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the quantification of the point. And Alan, to your point, it's interesting. When you talk about the bundles of services you offer, I have actually been moving away from calling myself a fractional CMO and moving back towards the marketing and strategy consultant, because it is broader, it is at some level differentiated, And I think it actually more accurately conveys the breadth of services available.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to get on like Google Trends and look at what people are actually searching for. If someone needs marketing help, are they searching for fractional CMO or consultant or that type of thing? But
that's actually what I wanted to ask you about next is, flipping it around to the client side or the company employer side. Like, what challenges do you think companies are facing right now finding like great marketing people?
good grief. I would say separating signal from noise.
Yeah.
It's I was reading an article, I don't remember if it was the Times or the Journal, and they're talking about the rise of AI in the recruiting space. And you basically have the battling AIs. You have the candidates using AI to just
It's an arms race. Yeah.
shoot content to the companies, and the companies using AI to sort out the AI being shot at them.
Yeah.
And so how do you actually go find somebody who's qualified? Which I think, if you go back to Alan's earlier point, it's the relationships. It's the flight to what you know, as opposed to the random stack of 1,000 people who apply. Alan, what do you see?
I would also say it's having the right expectations of what marketing is,
Mm-hmm.
and what marketing can do, and what you're looking for. I mean, example, the CEOs understanding what marketing is, what it can do, is really
Mm-hmm.
important to the CEO CMO relationship. And recruiters look for Cinderella.
Mm-hmm.
There are 12 criteria that the client has. You've got to have 14. So what I advise people is, recruiters are important, retain recruiters, but don't make it any more than 10 to 15% of your search.
Yeah.
You're going to be a lot more, and don't apply to everything online. It goes into a big black hole. You can see the void when you click. You're very unlikely to hear something. Maybe you'll hear something back, but there's so many. By the time it's online, there's so many people that shoot their resumes, and it may be AI generated resumes to look exactly like the job description. You're much better off networking with people that know you, and just referrals and networking is
So
the way to
is
go.
that
Whether you're looking for
is that what
fractional work or
companies
full-time.
and business people are telling you, that like they're just swamped with
Oh yeah, with
marketing
resumes.
people
Yeah.
that are not qualified and should not have applied?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
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 And
It's interesting because with all the technology, we actually seem to be reverting in the recruiting process, which is reverting back to the old school. Who do you know?
yeah.
And
And who knows you?
yeah, and the Alan, going back to Alan about networking, I have been impressed at how generous people have been with their time. Maybe it's just because I live in Portland. You've got Portland Nice, but I think it's broader than that. Because when I'm reaching out to people with a reasonable pitch for networking, it's actually a surprisingly high hit rate, and it's the same thing with referrals.
Yeah.
Do you think that there are companies that are not doing some kinds of marketing or not doing as much marketing as they otherwise would have, simply because they don't have like people?
Oh yeah,
Of course.
yeah.
The right people, or enough
Well,
of the right people?
yeah, and Dean, I think that manifests in two different levels. The first level where it manifests is the leadership level.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the people with the vision, if you don't have kind of the full stack marketer leader who has a sense of what the full suite of things is and is willing to try the full suite of things, it doesn't matter whether or not you have the people to execute. So you need someone with the vision and experience. And then, yeah, you do actually need the operators. Now, to me, the operators portion is getting earlier because there's so many people in our existing network, so many people in Fiverr and Upwork and other places, so many agencies. You can find all sorts of people to run all sorts of experiments. But you fundamentally have to have someone like an experienced fractional CMO who's got the vision and can plan and execute against that.
When I position what I offer clients, it's really three things. It's strategy, it's leadership, and it's my network. I do lots of strategy work, to your point earlier, Doug, mostly strategy. And when it comes to executing things, I have a lot of partners like Dean and others that are excellent at doing what they do. And over time, building a network. I think our value, if you look at our careers and our value, really are related to two things. It's what we know, and it's spotting patterns over time, recurring patterns of problems that we've seen again and again, and we know how to solve those problems.
Yeah.
And the problems that our clients and customers have. That's part of our value. And the other part is our network. And as we progress more, the network becomes even more than 50%. It's important to know people, where you see different issues and problems that you can bring in. And it's more fun that way too, I think.
All right, so here's my next question. Going back to the companies, okay? We've talked about for various reasons. Part of it is just, the economy. Part of it is like concern, at least near-term concern about the economy and hesitancy and so on, right? And we talked about, as a result of one or more of those, marketing budgets getting a bit tighter, right? So if you're a company and you're, like, let's say you take a random selection of 10 companies, so we'll spread it out a bit, right? Everyone's budget just got tightened a bit on marketing, let's say. That's our hypothetical. Like, what sort of marketing tactics are delivering, a good ROI right now in 2024?
It depends on the company. Are they, a volume company? Are they,
I gave you a selection of 10. You can
size?
pick whatever you want.
For some companies, it's events. For other companies, it's web and digital marketing, and and what I would say is things that really aren't being done much, but I think should be, are breakthrough direct marketing programs. Yeah. Everybody's used to digital. Right. No one sends a letter anymore. No one sends, a 3D package to break through. There's so much digital out there. There's an opportunity to break through with different methods than everybody else is using. And I think, that's part of the creative part of marketing is how do you understand your target audience, your ideal customer profile? What are their watering holes? Where do they look? And how can you reach them in new or even old analog ways that people aren't doing now to differentiate yourself?
Yeah. Be different. Absolutely. My youngest daughter just went off to college last week, and she sent an email to the extended family saying, "I'd love to get a letter from you." And actually, my older daughter, she had a matrix on the wall of her college dorm room, which is the envelopes from all the letters that people had sent her. So even for digital natives, getting that physical piece of something, that personal something that's physical and tangible, was really, really important to them. And Alan, unfortunately, I totally agree with you on everything else you're saying, which is, it depends. You have to know and understand your customer, and you have to figure out how to be different than everybody else. And it means going back to your earlier theme, spending time thinking, not just relentlessly executing, not just looking at the dashboards. You really need to step back, take that strategic offsite and think, and do it with your team, and do it with the whole team, not just the senior folks. The young folks have some really great ideas too. Sorry, the early career folks have a lot of great ideas.
And finding time every week to carve off strategy. In fact, at CMO Coffee Talk, that's the topic for tomorrow, is how do you carve off time for strategy? But that's really important to do because you get so busy, you have so many interruptions, it's hard to get back to strategy, but it's so important that you do that on an ongoing basis. I don't know if that answers your question, Dean, or not, but
it does. All right. So it's time to wind down. We're out of time on this episode. Doug, who should be contacting you these days, and how do you want him to get to you?
Yeah, if you're a B2B tech marketing person, love to have a chat with you, especially if you're looking to build a program. My specialty is building programs up, or in some cases, rebuilding programs. And I work in both the marketing and the strategy place. The best way to get a hold of me is through my website, peakpointsolutions.com. There's a form on there. You can also hit me on LinkedIn, and it's D Hunter Digital. So LinkedIn/in/D Hunter Digital. And I usually respond within 24 hours.
All right. And Alan? Who should be contacting you these days and how?
Well, I've mentored over 140 chief marketing officers and VPs of marketing. So I love helping CMOs and marketing leaders as an advisor, coach, and mentor. Mm-hmm. It's a big part of what I do. So if you're that, or you're a private equity investor or CEO at a portfolio company, and I can help you as either an interim CMO or due diligence or help your in-place CMOs be more productive and effective. Those are some of my target audiences, primarily private equity investors, CMOs, and also chief customer officers. I can help with implementing NPS, Net Promoter Score, properly. Mm-hmm. The way to get a hold of me, I'm not going to ask you to spell my last name because no one can. Mm-hmm. So you can go to demandrevenue.com, or you can email me at ag@demandrevenue.com or LinkedIn, any of those.
Nice and short.
Dean, thank you for doing these. It's a pleasure to be back with you, and you too, Doug.
Pleasure. Yes, thank you.
It's always great to have people back on because they've been through the process and we can, open it up a bit. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.